most impactful horror films will always come from some guy in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of friends who've made a movie and it's a huge success. As soon as you have a committee involved, it never works. It's not a committee, it's a singular vision.
When you have one person with one clear vision, that comes through in the final product. So it's an important thing that there is a director that sees it through from start to finish. The lower the budget, the more creative a filmmaker can get to realize their vision.
I know at one point in time, they were thinking about doing the Halloween that they were going to do was like they were going to take it back to the I don't know if they were going to go back in time or set it in modern times, but the cop that was in part 2 that rode along with Loomis, because Sheriff Brackett kind of comes out of the thing, they were going to focus it on him, and it was going to be like, I believe it was supposed to be set in between. Was actually supposed to be the actual Halloween 3. That's what it was. They were actually going to do like Halloween 3 after the part 2 where they blew up, and it was going to be based on that cop and what Michael did.
So like a retcon.
Yeah, like sort of like a retcon type thing where they were actually going to do an actual Halloween 3.
I don't have a problem with that so much too, because that's what I liked about Halloween Kills, and I was sad we didn't see any in Halloween Ends or 2018. And that was kind of like the how they do the flashbacks, because they did them so well. Like I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I would almost like a whole movie like this.
Right. I think that's what they should do.
And when you said that, that's what made me think of that. I'm like, because they should have done like a Halloween 3, and you can just have somebody come in and you can deep fake young Jamie Lee Curtis's face over top of her and have her do the voice.
Yeah, that, or you could just leave her out of it
or leave her out of it altogether, and bring that guy in who looks just like Loomis. I mean, fuck.
Yeah, that guy could just get a better voice, because the guy that did the voice,
better voice.
Yeah, that wasn't very good. But you can set in between. Like I think a lot of things with these slashers, especially when you set them in modern times, it's hard to go around certain things. And I think you could probably do something like, instead of let's be honest, the next Halloween movie is going to be a reboot, and we will get another Halloween movie. We will. Just it may take it will be years, but you could really just like forego that and set it in the past without really saying it's 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever. You just set it in a certain time frame, and
I don't mind if they do that with some of these horror films at all, to be honest with you, because it makes more sense.
Especially since a lot of these are like famous from the 80s. You can still keep them in the 80s or ambiguously 80s or 90s or and it would work so much better. And you wouldn't even, much like how people are so tired of seeing the origin story of Superman and Spider-Man and Batman. Well, you know who Michael Myers is. Set him in Haddonfield. It's Halloween night, 1987, 1992. Doesn't matter. Laurie's gone or whatever. It don't have to be Laurie. It could be somebody else. It could be the sheriffs. Sure. It could be just some babysitters he sees. Somehow he's there, and you go with it.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because the shit that's in Halloween Kills, I mean, it really feels like it's almost right out of the first Halloween film. It's just uncanny.
Especially the flashback scene with Loomis, which was probably
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I mean. Exactly.
That was my favorite part of that movie, honestly, because I mean you know how they you saw like the behind the scenes pictures of them putting like that looked amazing. Plus he even sounded like Donald Pleasance too. It's like,
I mean, the voice could have used some work. It didn't quite sound like him. He's like, did Michael kill again? And it's like a little too British.
I don't know, man. That was pretty.
He was pretty good though, but yeah. And that's another thing, getting into like the cell phones and stuff, because modern technology makes horror films so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're doing like a Nightmare on Elm Street where Freddy can transcend the technology. Because once you have a cell phone into the picture, and it's really hard to believe that in most places outside of Friday the 13th where it works, but then you still have to have the obligatory, oh, my fucking cell phone don't work scene.
Yeah.
You can't get a fucking signal scene. And that gets
you got no signal.
So and that's where I don't have any problems with seeing a Texas Chainsaw, Friday the 13th, Halloween, what have you, sequel set in 1980 something or 1970 something. I would have no problem. And plus you get to play around a bit. You get to do costuming, because then you got to make sure you got period accurate costumes. You can play with the soundtrack a little bit. You can have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what these movies used to do. They used to have fun and be kind of an event to them.
Yep.
Even though they wouldn't make a buttload of money, they made enough money for them to keep doing them. And they keep bringing our butts back in the seats to watching them or renting them, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
point being is if you just capture that, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but that's
No,
where you
it
can have
doesn't.
fun and play with it. I like that idea of
I do too.
a part 3 of that
Halloween.
guy doing it. If not,
Yeah.
like set up somebody else. It doesn't matter. Like you can do things with that, right? Like there's ways we can play with these characters and have fun and do a multiverse kind of thing of like that, in a sense of like almost bonding the characters, like James Bond. I mean, in a sense of like just switching out some actors and stuff here and there if you have to for younger versions. And I don't really usually like prequels, but if you're doing new sequels, that's a different concept.
Yeah, I mean, so what? You don't have somebody that looks exactly like the cop from Halloween 3. You can just find someone close enough and make him look like it, and just say, this like freaking like with Iron Man, the Rhodes. You just you can just do that. Like, oh, you look a little different. Well, it's been a year since the last Halloween.
Well, you don't even have to do that, but like they did such a great job in this, even finding younger versions of like Will Patton's character.
Oh yeah, that kid did. Especially, I noticed that too. Like when he was standing at the end of Ends, and he kind of looked like that kid more there than he did. You know what I mean?
Because he's skinnier in Ends, and that's what helps. But they found a kid who had the same kind of nose as him, and it just happens to work. Like they found some people are good with that kind of casting, where they can find people who just happen to catch the certain looks and essence of what somebody might look like if they were younger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you find the right actor, and in most cases they don't do that very well, but in this case they did a good job with those actors. And then the same thing again, just happened to have the guy who worked on the movie looks like Loomis. And I thought it was all CGI. I'm like, that's a damn good CGI. And then we find out, no, it's not really.
It's just a guy
It's
they
an
made
actor
up.
who looks just like him. It's crazy how he looks just like him, but
yeah, I know. But I would totally be down for that. And so I don't know if anybody was ever listened to this or see this, but if anybody's listened to this and can get a chance to get to the Halloween movies down the road, away from the Blumhouse, away from this stink,
we can have
do something
Halloween,
like that.
You can look. You are onto something here. You got the young guy there that looks just like Loomis, right?
Right.
You can have. How would you like to have every year or every other year a Halloween movie? You have Halloween 79, Halloween 80. Halloween 81,
right?
Halloween 82. You don't have to have whatever, but every one of them is Loomis has got to go after him. You have this young guy to play him, and whatever reason, something gets in the fucking way each time of him killing him, or we think he's dead. And you can play around with that for a couple movies, at least even a trilogy. Like do it like Halloween. Okay, like he comes back every 5 years, so 78, 9, 8, 9, 9, 9. It'd be what, 83, right? So Halloween 83 would be your new sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And the best part is, it's got a 3 in the title.
Mm-hmm.
So you can play it off like it's the new part 3.
Yeah, this is the Halloween 3 that we should have got.
And the better part is you still keep the canon that Loomis tried to burn them both alive, and they both managed to live.
Mm-hmm.
So they both have burns. So then you can actually put a little bit more makeup on the guy who plays Loomis, so you don't have to worry about him not, because that was the thing, is they shot him from distance all the time. Because the close-up pictures, he's not quite a spot-on image, but he's pretty damn close. Or then you don't have to worry about CGIing him or about anything, because you just have excess makeup on him because he's burnt, kind of like they did in part 4, right?
Or you could even, like, if you don't want to use, you could like have Loomis just make a cameo in the hospital because he's burned up. You know what I mean? Like
you
he's
just
not
got to
ready.
keep him alive. I love this idea
just
of
keep
just
him alive.
Loomis being there. This new Loomis guy. This guy looks just like him. He doesn't have to be an actor. He just has to be Loomis.
Yeah,
right?
and you wouldn't even need him for the whole movie. Like I said, you could like have him be there. He could be in the hospital bed, still burned up, and then that cop visits him, and then he goes on his, looking for Michael Myers or whatever.
Either way, but I like the idea of that you can have Loomis continue on. And my point was going to be, then you do 83, then you jump 5 more years ahead of that, which would be like what Halloween 87.
That's true. I mean, and you
can just do them every couple years, and you have this whole like pattern to it, and you can play with the era, because in 83 was a certain kind of time in the 80s. 87 was a much different time in the 80s. So you have a little fun with that.
So you can even do into the 90s, because like after part 5, there's a huge gap into the 90s that Michael, what
the
was
beauty
going
of it
on
is,
there.
like I'm saying, is you're like making your own. We already have enough fucking choose your own adventures in this fucking franchise already.
Exactly.
Like this is its own thing. Like you come back in a couple of years from now, you like take this idea, like, okay, Halloween 1 and 2 all take place on the same night, right? 1978. As far as we're concerned, that's the end of that story. 5 years later, though, here it's 1980 or 1983.
83.
And Michael Myers coming back, and you're doing like with that same guy who played Loomis in Halloween Kills, like I said, and you just do a couple movies with him, and you just kind of have the same kind of, that old Halloween feel. They don't all have to be the same. You can find gimmicks for each one. But my point is there's your diving board into this idea. Like I said, of course, it's 1983. Well, what was the popular music of the time? What was some of the things you can play with of that era?
Exactly.
Then 87, same kind of difference. Yeah.
You could do so much stuff. And I do agree. I think maybe they need to start taking these.
With Stranger Things, it would work so well right now.
Exactly. You could take these old 80s and you can keep the canon to boot. You can make a Friday the 13th in the 80s. There's so many years in between that, the campground where he could do it. There's so many years, like you said, every 5 years with Michael Myers. There's so many like Texas Chainsaw Massacres you could slip in there with Leatherface and his family, and not the new shit that's on Netflix. Like Freddy Krueger, you could do Freddy Krueger, and Freddy Krueger could even still be done today in the modern age because he transcends the technology. Because
that's what I was saying.
Because you don't need a computer or cell phone in a dream world.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, so that don't matter.
But with Friday the 13th, like, you can just do Friday the 13th. Friday 13. And it literally be just like another Friday the 13th movie set in 1980 something.
Yeah.
Or pick up in 1990.
Yeah.
Because the last one was in 89. And then there you go. Or whatever the next year had a Friday the 13th after that, and say, it's Friday the 13th, 19. No.
Yeah. It's 1980 or 90s. Yeah. There's so many of these that you could really do. And there's so many gaps in between the years. I think it would work.
And it's just so kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Synonymous or something to that effect. That's not the word I'm looking for. But when we think of those movies, maybe, but it's like, because you think of the costumes, like the people, or the 80s outfits and stuff people were wearing, like those would now be considered quote unquote costumes, because you have to design that shit to make it look like it was from that era and accurate to that era. And that's the beauty of it, is I like those kind of productions more than I do modern productions anymore. Modern productions feel so like that was my highlight for Halloween Kills, is going back and like, oh my god, they did such a great job. Look at all the cars. They made sure they were all cars of the right era.
Yep.
And the cop uniforms look exactly like they did in the first movie. I love that attention to detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I love going back, like you're going back to see and see it from an angle, or do it in a way you didn't see it before, or another story set in that era. I like that concept.